Julio was only 14 years old when he began sleeping on the hard, unforgiving streets of Abuja. He had no home, no parents, and no real name. At least none anyone remembered. His only possessions were a sack for collecting bottles, a torn t-shirt, and a heart that hadn't yet lost its ability to care. Every morning, under the blistering sun or pouring rain, Julio roamed the market stalls, collecting scraps and metal. He was invisible to most, just another street child in a world too busy to care. Sometimes he got lucky. A passerby would toss him a few coins, but most of the time, he was pushed away, scolded, or ignored. Still, Julio smiled at little things, an extra bread crust, a dry place to sleep, or the laugh of another homeless boy. One day, Julio hadn't eaten for nearly 2 days. His belly growled as he walked from one restaurant trash pile to another, hoping to find leftovers. At the back of a small roadside eatery, he spotted it, a discarded bowl of rice and beans, barely touched. His eyes lit up. He dropped to his knees and picked it up with trembling hands. Just as he was about to eat, he heard a strange noise, a groan. It came from behind the dumpster. Curious and concerned, he walked closer and saw a woman lying on the ground. She was pregnant, sweating, and barely conscious. Her skin looked pale, her lips dry. Julio forgot his hunger and dropped his food. He rushed to her, knelt beside her, and gently lifted her head. She was mumbling something, too weak to move. Julio didn't think twice. He took a spoonful of the rice and beans and gently fed it to her, one grain at a time. She chewed slowly, barely managing. When she opened her eyes and saw him, her lips trembled. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice like paper. Julio looked at her and said, "Because I know what hunger feels like. And your baby, he shouldn't suffer." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card, bent, faded, but clean. "Find me one day," she whispered, "if you ever need help." Then, slowly, she stood and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Julio with the taste of kindness in his mouth instead of food. That woman was Natasha Oduah. Just weeks earlier, she had lived in a mansion with marble floors and a Mercedes parked out front. She was the wife of Obinna Oduah, one of Abuja's most powerful businessmen. They had wealth, fame, and power, everything except honesty. Natasha had recently found out that Obinna had a second family, a mistress and a child. When she confronted him, he shrugged. "You'll get over it," he said. When she didn't, he froze her accounts, took her phone, and threw her out, pregnant and powerless. With nowhere to go and no one to call, she wandered the streets in shame. That's when years passed. Julio grew taller, stronger, but his life didn't change much. He was still homeless, still collecting bottles, still sleeping under market stalls. Then one evening, as he crossed a busy street with his sack full of scraps, a car sped around the corner and hit him. Bottles flew into the air, blood smeared across the road, people screamed. The driver panicked and rushed him to the hospital. He was unconscious, broken, and unrecognizable, just another boy the world wouldn't miss. But when a nurse walked into the emergency room and saw his face, she froze. Her heart dropped. She leaned in, looked closer, and whispered, "Julio." It was Natasha. She had become a nurse after that day. She had rebuilt her life, brick by brick, working night shifts, studying on borrowed books, and raising her daughter alone. But she never forgot the boy who saved her. Now, here he was, broken but alive. She held his hand and cried, "You saved me once. Now it's my turn." For 2 weeks, Natasha cared for Julio as if he were her own son. She fed him, changed his bandages, and talked to him until he woke up. When he finally opened his eyes, confused and weak, she smiled and said, "You're safe now. I never forgot you." When he was well enough to leave the hospital, Natasha didn't send him back to the street. She brought him home, a small apartment, warm and modest, but filled with peace. That night, a little girl ran into the room, about 6 years old, with curly hair and bright eyes. She stopped when she saw him. "Mommy, who is that?" she asked. Natasha knelt beside her and smiled. "This is Julio. He saved your life before you were even born." The little girl stared at him, walked over and gave him a hug. "Thank you," she whispered. Her name was Zuri. "It means beautiful in Swahili," Natasha said. "She lives because of you." Julio cried that night, harder than he'd ever cried. Not from pain, but from being seen, from being loved. He stayed with them from that day forward. He learned to read, to write, to wash dishes, to laugh again. Natasha got him a job at a recycling center. He started earning real money, saving coins in a jar labeled "Future." No more sacks, no more begging. For the first time, he had a bed, a toothbrush, a family. And every night, Zuri would say, "Good night, big brother." And he'd reply, "Good night, miracle." Julio's story reminds us, greatness doesn't wear suits or live in mansions. Sometimes it sleeps on sidewalks and still finds a way to love. He gave his last meal to a stranger. That act came full circle and gave him a life he never imagined. The Strip shimmered under the early Vegas sun, already humming with Life Street performers. Neon signs and blinking marquees clashed with the smell of brewed coffee and cigarette ash. Inside a sleek downtown cafe, the scent of roasted beans mingled with chatter. Behind the counter stood Maya Brooks, mid-30s, poised, quiet, and deliberate. She wore a green apron, her hair pulled into a neat bun. No one knew she had once walked Harvard's halls. Maya moved swiftly, wiping down counters between orders. She didn't smile much. Life hadn't offered her many reasons lately. But she was efficient, kind when spoken to, and always on time. The regulars liked her. Still, to most, she was just another barista, someone to hand over coffee and stay invisible. And she didn't mind. After all, invisibility sometimes kept pain at bay. Then the door chimed. He entered with a presence that demanded notice: crisp suit, gold cufflinks, leather briefcase. His name was Carl Wentworth, vice president of a real estate firm with buildings sprawled across the Strip. People bowed for him. Except Maya, who only looked up and asked, "Good morning. What can I get started for you?" Polite, neutral, nothing more. Carl didn't bother to meet her eyes. "Black, no sugar. Make it quick. I'm late." His voice had that cutting edge, sharp like ice. Maya nodded and turned to prepare it. As she handed it over, his phone buzzed. Distracted, he reached clumsily. His hand knocked the cup. A splash of hot coffee poured across the counter and onto Maya's apron and hand. She flinched, hissing under her breath. "It's Okeb," she said quickly, reaching for napkins. Carl didn't apologize. Instead, he scoffed. "Well, maybe if you people could hold a cup properly." He stopped mid-sentence, but the damage was done. You people. The words hung like smog in the air. The cafe went silent. Even the espresso machine hissed disapprovingly. Maya froze, the pain in her hand dulling beneath the sting of humiliation. Her skin wasn't just burned by coffee, it was burned by a deeper, older wound. But she didn't shout, didn't cry. She simply whispered, "Sir, please." Carl rolled his eyes, tossed a $10 bill on the counter like it was a bone to a dog, and stormed out. No one said a word. Not even the manager. The silence after the storm. The cafe remained eerily quiet long after Carl left. Maya stood stiff, dabbing her soaked apron. The coffee had cooled quickly, but the heat of shame lingered. She didn't look at anyone. Not the teenage couple near the window. Not the older woman clutching her drink. No one said anything. Not even her supervisor, Jared, who busied himself with the register, pretending nothing happened. When Maya finally stepped into the back room, her hands shook. Not from the burn, but from the memory that never truly faded of being a child in Mississippi, watching her father be told to step aside by a white officer. Same tone, same disdain. Now, decades later, those two words, "you people," still sliced just as deep.